The night Daniel Harper stopped to help the woman on the side of the snowy Toronto highway, he had exactly $12 in his wallet, an overdue electricity bill at home, and a 6-year-old son waiting for him with a school project due in the morning. He almost kept driving. Almost. But one look at the black luxury car half buried in snow and the figure slumped against the steering wheel changed everything. Daniel was a single dad in Scarborough, working double shifts at a warehouse near Pearson Airport. Since his wife passed away 3 years ago, life had been a constant balancing act between rent, groceries, and making sure little Liam still believed the world was a good place. That evening, freezing wind whipped across Highway 401, and traffic had slowed because of an accident further ahead. Daniel noticed hazard lights blinking faintly in the distance. Most cars passed by carefully, not stopping. It wasn't safe, people would say. It wasn't their problem, but Daniel pulled over. When he reached the car, he saw a woman in her early 40s, pale and unconscious, her head resting against the window. Her coat looked expensive, her diamond earrings catching the light of passing headlights. A faint trail of blood ran from her forehead. Daniel's heart pounded. He dialed 911 with trembling fingers and forced the door open. Snow dusted the leather seats as he tried to keep her awake. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Stay with me," he pleaded, his breath visible in the cold air. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but to Daniel, it felt like hours. Paramedics rushed her inside. One of them asked if he was family. "No," Daniel said quietly. "I just couldn't leave her." They insisted he come along to the hospital to give a statement. So Daniel texted his elderly neighbor to check on Liam and climbed into the ambulance, unaware that this single decision would change his life. At Toronto General Hospital, doctors discovered the woman had suffered a severe concussion and internal bleeding. She was rushed into surgery. Daniel waited in the sterile hallway, still in his worn-out boots and faded jacket, feeling out of place among polished floors and worried relatives dressed in tailored coats. An hour later, a sharply dressed man approached him. "Are you the one who called 911? He asked. Daniel nodded. The man introduced himself as Victor Langford, the woman's personal assistant. The patient was Evelyn Langford, founder and CEO of one of Canada's fastest-growing tech companies. Her face had appeared on magazine covers. She was known for her sharp business sense and private lifestyle. Daniel blinked. He had no idea. Victor thanked him formally, almost stiffly, and assured him the company would handle everything. Daniel shrugged it off. "I just did what anyone would do." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Not everyone stopped. Daniel returned home past midnight. Liam ran into his arms, asking if he had saved someone like a superhero. Daniel smiled wearily. "No cape, buddy. Just helped someone who needed it." Days passed. Daniel heard nothing more. Life returned to its usual rhythm of early mornings, packed lunches, and long shifts. Then 2 weeks later, as Daniel struggled to explain to Liam why they might have to move to a smaller apartment, a black SUV pulled up outside their building. Victor stepped out. Daniel's stomach tightened. Had he done something wrong? Instead, Victor handed him a handwritten letter. The envelope bore elegant cursive writing. Inside, Evelyn explained that she had finally woken up. The doctors told her that if Daniel hadn't stopped when he did, she might not have survived the blood loss in the freezing temperature. She wrote that for years she had built companies, signed million-dollar deals, and believed success was measured in profits. But lying in that hospital bed, she realized her life had been saved not by wealth or status, but by the kindness of a stranger who had nothing to gain. Daniel felt his throat tighten as he read. Victor then said Evelyn wanted to meet him. A week later, Daniel found himself sitting across from Evelyn in a bright hospital recovery room overlooking downtown Toronto. She looked different from the photos online. Softer, grateful, human. "I've spent years investing in ideas," she told him gently. "But I forgot to invest in people. You reminded me what matters." Daniel felt uncomfortable when she mentioned wanting to help him financially. He didn't want charity. Pride was one of the few things poverty hadn't taken from him. Evelyn seemed to sense this. Instead of offering him a check, she offered him something else. A position. She had recently launched a community initiative aimed at supporting single parents across Ontario, affordable childcare, flexible jobs, education grants. She wanted someone who truly understood the struggle to help shape it. Not a polished executive, a real parent. I don't have a business degree, Daniel said quietly. You have something better, Evelyn replied. You stopped. The program launched 3 months later. Daniel worked closely with community centers in Toronto, Mississauga, and Brampton, sharing his story, listening to others. For the first time since his wife's death, he felt not just like he was surviving, but contributing. And something else changed too. Evelyn changed. She shifted her company's focus towards social impact projects. She personally visited families benefiting from the initiative. Headlines in Canadian business magazines began to talk about her transformation. Some called it a strategic move. But Daniel knew better. He had seen the tears in her eyes when she visited a shelter and held a baby whose mother reminded her of what could have happened if no one had stopped that night. One snowy evening, almost exactly a year after the accident, Daniel and Liam were invited to a small gathering celebrating the program's anniversary. Families shared stories about finding stable jobs, securing childcare, returning to school. Liam tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, you really are a superhero." Daniel knelt beside him. "No, buddy, I just didn't drive away." Across the room, Evelyn watched them, her eyes shining. 2 weeks in a hospital bed had changed her life. But it was one poor single dad on a freezing Canadian highway who reminded her that wealth means nothing without compassion. Sometimes the biggest transformations don't begin in boardrooms or bank accounts. They begin with a simple choice in a cold moment: to stop, to care, and to believe that someone else's life is worth your time. And that choice can change more than one life.